All right. So this section is on risk management. So fun topic. One of what I think is the most important skills that the PM has, because once you have a plan, your entire job becomes essentially managing risk and issues on your project. Status updates, things like that, those, really the coordinating are not high skill kind of areas. You're usually just working with your team to figure out where things are. But being able to analyze what's happening with your project, start, identifying, I wouldn't say predicting, but identifying potential things that could go wrong and preventing them from going wrong, or when they do go wrong, quickly solving those problems and getting things back on track is very valuable, and what I would consider the strongest skill need of a project manager. And I'm sure most of you have seen that if you've managed large, complex projects. So just from a risk and issues management perspective, one thing I want to just hit home here is that I want to make sure everyone has the same definition of what a risk is versus an issue versus a decision versus a change request, because they are all in order of one causing the next. So risk is what could go wrong for your project. This is where you want to spend a lot of time, probably every week as a PM, thinking about what can go wrong. Like, what's the things that could cause me to not deliver this successfully, whether it's not deliver the scope they expect, not deliver on time, on budget, not deliver the benefit that they're thinking they're going to get out of this. So what are the things that could go wrong? You want to be thinking about that. You want to be having those conversations with your team. You understand the things that could go wrong. If you're not able to successfully mitigate those risks, they will turn into an issue that impacts your project potentially. So when you're thinking about a risk, coming up with your mitigation, doing all that, that is to prevent an issue from happening. So your risk is the potential of what could go wrong. Your issue is something is already going wrong. Ideally, you want that issue to be a result of an already communicated risk that you tried to mitigate. So when we think about like impact to our project, when you have the conversation of, oh, I'm already being impacted, chances are there was a risk that existed prior to that, that if mitigation was feasible or if you were able to mitigate it, this issue would not be occurring, not be impacting your project. There are different types of risk. A lot of risk are beyond our control. When you think about a storm, we can identify it. We can do our best to mitigate it, meaning figure out how to, contingency plan for it or continuity plan for it, do all those things so it doesn't impact us if it actually occurs. We can't prevent a storm from happening. However, there are a lot of things, like I mentioned earlier, like if we think about scope creep and we think about volatility and requirements. If your users request new requirements, request new scope, that if we know it's coming from a group that traditionally always is very indecisive and non-committal to what they want to get until they get into UAT, there are things you can do up front to help mitigate that, to lessen the chances that that group's going to come up with new stuff at the end. So if we know that is something this group does, we want to record it as a risk, and we want to think through, can we get something visually in front of them? Or were they signing off on something? Can we escalate the sign off so that it's very clear, outside of this, you'll get a phase, 2, or, that kind of thing. So what are the things that we can do to help drive to lessening the chances of scope creep or requirements volatility impacting our project? Those are not things that are beyond our control, meaning they're being driven from somewhere else, but there's things that we can do that potentially slow that train down or negotiate out, a better path for them. So, it could be looking at where on previous projects requirements have changed. Is it in a certain area that we should work with a little bit closely, these stakeholders? Is it, in an area that we don't even have an SME assigned to our project yet? So there's things like that as a PM. If I know that risk exists, I'm thinking through that kind of stuff to try and add things to my plan that will mitigate and really lessen the chances of that issue occurring late. Just saying, it's out of our control. It really tends to be naturally occurring events that are out of our control, like storms and things like that, or things that have never ever happened on a project like this before. Like it's not even something we would have thought of as potentially being able to impact our projects. But there are some pretty common ones that always exist that we need to be thinking about and not just letting cause issues on our project. So you have a risk, that's the maybe. This may impact my project. You have an issue, this is impacting my project, which results in two things: a decision to be made about how to address that impact, and a change request that requests additional dollars or time or scope reduction or increase to accommodate that issue. So the way it happens is you have a risk. If you don't successfully mitigate it, it becomes an issue. And then that will require that you get a decision and a change request to follow. So given that's the model, in most cases, not all, in most cases, you shouldn't have a change request if you never had a risk identified. Your change request should be driven on a risk that existed. You communicated it to your stakeholders, you communicated it to your leadership team, it still happened, and now I have this change request. So when change requests come through, it shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be, oh my God, I need more money. It's for this thing that went wrong. They should have already knew there was a potential of that thing going wrong prior, had a say in whether we are able to mitigate that or not. And then they see that change. So it's really important that your change request, the way you're thinking about change request, is this is a result of a risk not being mitigated that caused an issue that now I have a change impact to my project. And the decision is, how do we deal with that? How do we absorb that impact? Or do we stop the project now? Or do it, that's where the decision comes in. So, and the reason I'm saying it in that order is because the way I've seen most change requests governance set up is you have a conversation about the risk. So as a PM, my performance is not going to be hit if I tried to mitigate it. I did everything I could. I communicated it well. I got everyone's viewpoint on how to mitigate it, and it still happened. I'm not going to be penalized for that. If I have a change request and I didn't even bother thinking through what could go wrong or trying to mitigate it, if I did identifying it, in my mind, and where I've seen in the past the governance land is that is a performance issue for the PM, because we should be actively risk managing the project and keeping our change requests to a minimum as much as possible. There is no way to prevent every issue from occurring on your project. That is unrealistic. Also, I have never seen an IT project that only had one or two risks. You generally have a lot of risks. Now, some have lower probability and lower potential impact, but every project has a lot of risk in it, just by the nature of doing IT projects. So just wanted to kind of set that. So these really are like if one, then the other type thing. Where do we get this to fit into the stage gate process? So currently the way we have it set up is you do a qualitative risk assessment pretty early on. So like in your business case, you're really going to be asked how risky is delivering this project. It's in the business case template. It's really like a qualitative, what are those things that could go wrong? and then an overall like high level assessment of how risky this project is based on that overall high level assessment. It's all qualitative. It's not actually nailing down, you know, your potential impact dollars or potential impact time into that. It's more just trying to figure out how risky this project is for delivery. You stay there until you have your first plan, which is after project initiation. Then when you go into, for waterfall, develop initial design, or agile into your plan stages, you will do a quantitative risk assessment, and I'll show a little bit further what that looks like. And then you're just updating your risk and contingencies. And this is important when I say updating contingency, because this will get a little bit more granular next year as well, is you should be releasing contingency when the risk close out. So you shouldn't be holding on to that, or not necessarily releasing it in a formal way, but we should be making it clear I no longer need that contingency because my risk was in design and design's over, kind of thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the stages you go through is identification, analysis, response, monitor and control, and closure. That's pretty common everywhere. I think that's the life cycle essentially of a risk. I want to stop here for a second because this is to me what's important. In risk identification, there are a lot of like good practices that come along with articulating a risk. So when we think about the title should be very clear and accurate representation. It usually is also like just a shortened version of it. So it gives you as much context about what the risk is without too many words, essentially. Your description should, however, be written as an if-then. If this occurs, then this is the impact to my project. It should always be clear that if what happens, what occurs. And that's really how you need to be thinking about describing your risk. I know this is a trigger for some of our leadership as well, because this is what they're looking for when they're looking to better appreciate what risk exists for projects. Should contain an event and trigger information. Also, areas of impact should be clear. Like if it's going to impact your schedule by this, or impact your, you know, it should impact your cost by this, impact your scope by this. What is it going to impact, and how is it going to impact that? And that is how you can clearly articulate what this risk is and give a good appreciation for the audience as to what you're trying to mitigate here. Impact value should be appropriate for the description. So this is, again, kind of one of those places where we need to make sure it's in sync, like it makes sense. Probability is 1 to 99. Obviously, there's no 0 or 100. If it's 100, it's an issue already. If it's 0, it's not a risk. If it's in a realized state, then your probability is pretty high. That doesn't mean your risk necessarily closes out, because some risk can remain after an issue has occurred. But you're not managing it correctly if you show like 50% and it's been realized, unless you show it as a carryover risk. Essentially, that risk still exists on my project in future. All risks should have a planned close date, meaning not every, if all your risks show end of your project, that means you're not thinking about when that risk actually has its highest probability and most likely to impact your project. Because a lot of risk occurs prior to design. A lot of, once you have a design, how we're going to, deliver this, who's going to be the players in it. You have signed contracts with those folks. Like at that point, some risk has to be alleviated, right? And eventually what you'll see, and this is what I've seen in other organizations, it starts to drive the contingency budget as well conversation, because if you're carrying 10 million in contingency, but almost all your risks are closed and you only have a few low probability, low impact ones left, as a leadership team, they should be thinking about, do I want to spend that contingency money somewhere else? So it kind of starts to prevent from holding on to contingency. It requires more active risk management of your project. Your mitigation plan should be actionable, measurable. and you should be updating it regularly to say, I did this or didn't do this. This is some new ideas we have to mitigate, that kind of thing. Contingency plan should also have enough information to create an actionable plan with roles, responsibilities. So if this occurs, here's who's doing what when. So just some tips there to start thinking about it as you're creating your risk. Sorry, I don't have it here. It is on the template site, but I did create a cheat sheet for risk identification sessions. So when you, oh, there it is, it did bring it up. So when you're in those sessions with your teams as a PM, you want to prepare for the conversation and make sure you have questions that you want to ask them or ask yourself or, you know, whomever to drive out the risk associated with your project. So as you can see here, it's just a ton of questions around scope, design, things like that, technology projects. A lot of the areas we tend to see, essentially see risk pop up. This, if you read through this, this will allow you to extract the ones that are pertinent to your project and then take that to the conversation with your team to facilitate a risk assessment conversation so that you are on an ongoing basis thinking about what could go wrong. And this will give you like a kind of a starter tool of questions to go through. So for qualitative risk assessments, again, you're just saying, you know, probability and impact. We put some colors here and that you can follow, as well as, you know, based on quantitative. And what that'll do is the probability and the impact will drive essentially your risk index, which is your high level view of your risk, how risky your project is from a delivery standpoint. So I won't go through all of these, but essentially you assign a probability, you assign an impact, that calculates out what scale you're on based on the probability impact matrix. And then that's what you record in the system as your current probability. I mean, your current risk matrix. This becomes a little bit deeper. So first, you have, these are just the fields that are in ServiceNow. You saw where we can open the risk. These are additional fields related to that, that you would be able to utilize. I think at this point, we've put them all in ServiceNow. So we had a small enhancement to ensure that the risk log in ServiceNow matched what we were trying to capture. So this is just going in, adding that risk, and then filling out that information. And as you see, you know, when you're in your project, there's a risk tab, and you can just go create a new one. All right. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here because this is, you know, waterfall versus agile, but in the end, like, it's in the same place. You just go into your risk and create a new one, and then it'll bring up a form that you can fill out and save. When we start thinking about quantitative risk assessment during develop initial design, this is where I want to make sure folks are clear. So qualitative, I think everybody's probably done. It's more about being comprehensive and consistently thinking about that and actively managing it. When we talk about quantitative, I don't know that everybody's done this level of quantitative risk assessment, but you really start thinking not just about the risk, but about estimated cost of impact associated with the risk. So what is my minimum that it could cost me? What is the most likely? What is the maximum it could cost me? And then you start really putting numbers around impact out there. So you're really at that point capturing, you know, your probability stays the same. You start focusing on the potential impact to your project. So this is an example. This uses the PERT method, which is what we're using. I've done Monte Carlo simulation and things like that other places, but it requires a tool to provide that. And you need to think about level of exposure your company's willing to accept when it comes to risk. In this case, we tried to keep it very basic, using the PERT method to figure out really what would be your recommended contingency for that risk based on your estimate of the probability, the minimum cost, most likely, and maximum. And then it calculates what recommended contingency you should have. Now, when your contingency budget is set at funding, It may not be exactly matching this list, you know, like you can't sum these up probably and get it because you're doing this much later than that budget was set. You're not doing quantitative during your business case. So you get funding for a contingency amount. This as a PM helps me figure out if I have more or less contingency than I really need for my project based on the risk. So if I'm adding this up and it is like 25% of what budget I got, I probably have too much contingency budget. If I'm adding this up and it is 3 times my contingency budget, I have more risk to my delivery than my contingency budget will absorb. And those are good things as a PM to know, especially when you start managing those closeout dates and you're saying, okay, once I get to past design, I'll probably be able to close out 30% of these. So if I can make it to that, not needing that contingency budget, I can look at that and say, oh, well, now it looks more right. Now my contingency budget matches my risk for the remainder of my project. So it starts giving the PM that level of information to manage contingency, to know how risky they are, to know what's the risk that they're going to go over their contingency budget. So it really starts getting to that level. And at an executive level, they want to understand like how much of your risk has closed out as your project progresses. So they want to understand if you have 10 million contingency and most of your risk, 30% of your risk is closed out, your current estimate contingency that you need is only 2 million. That's important for leadership to know because you don't want those dollars to be saved for your project. It's potentially something they can go invest somewhere else and get more done with that money. So this is what quantitative risk assessment looks like. Like I said, I've done other models. This is the PERT method. This is pretty PMI standard recommendation, but it helps you figure out what contingency you should be keeping based on detailed risk. And then from a response standpoint, you're really looking at avoidance, transfer, minimize, and acceptance. And you can kind of, these are all pretty standard as well. So this is like, how am I going to respond to this risk? Can I mitigate it to minimize it? Does it require an investment to do that? Do I need to go say, hey, if you give me this one contractor for X number of dollars, that'll potentially keep us from not having as much risk in UAT, which could save us X number of dollars or potential, you know, commitment dates on the other side. So this is when you start like actively mitigating. You can transfer. So really it's a matter of just evaluating this particular risk and what the appropriate response would be. And then again, as I said, you need to make sure you're closing out your risk and have accurate close dates. And then really conducting a lessons learned with your team to ensure that you're capturing all of the, you know, we wish we would have did this, or we did this really well, because the goal would be we're going to create a lessons learned repository. And then when we do that, other teams that are coming in can search for different type of risk and see how did you mitigate that, see, you know, kind of the lessons that you learned and apply those to other projects. So some just important notes to kind of close it out here. Risk management is the key to effective project management. It is the best way to show that you are proactive in trying to drive the project forward with minimal issues. And it's really one of the strongest skills that a PM should have. And any large project that has been successful, you will find that PM probably was able to avoid multiple train wrecks way before it happened, just because they could kind of analyze what was going on and predict this could potentially be an issue for me if I don't do something. Every project has risk, and mitigating those is the key to delivery. There are no projects with no risk. Every project has risk, even if the risk doesn't exist to what you're doing right now. It probably does to what's going to happen downstream. So becoming effective at identifying those and trying to mitigate and communicate those is going to be important for you and how successful you are in delivering that. Risk assessments need to be done frequently. They are not something that you think about at the beginning, document, or just during status. Like, it really is your tool as a PM to avoid issues. So thinking about what could go wrong and trying to prevent that becomes a very important part of your daily job as a project manager. Communication and appropriate escalation will increase your potential for success. If you don't have the right conversations about the risk and your proposed mitigations, you're potentially missing an opportunity to get someone else's opinion of that may have another idea that will be more effective in mitigating it. And also, you avoid having your leadership find out after an issue occurred, which makes it seem like you weren't managing that proactively. And you really, so it's important that you do that communication. They should be closed out. So you should be able to say, I need a closeout date after design, because once I have design, I'll know enough and this is no longer a risk for me, that kind of thing. So it's not acceptable to show every risk closing out the last day of your project. And then your risk registers will start to be audited coming next year. We are putting together some risk compliance reports by request of our CIDO, because he wants to see more good quality risk being written, like the if-then statements, the mitigation plans being much more concise and clear and data-driven. So you will see that coming next year, where some of the folks will be looking at your risk logs to make sure they comply with those types of guidelines. And then contingency estimates based on risk I mentioned is also coming soon. So we're going to start looking at quantitative risk assessments to figure out how much contingency should be built into our portfolio, and then how much is currently built into our portfolio, to kind of figure out where we are from being able to spend all of our contingency or not perspective. And that is the end of that. Looks like we have about 3 minutes. Are there any questions? Let me go ahead and stop sharing so I can see the questions. All right, I don't see any out there. All right, so our next session, you no longer will have to listen to me. You will get to hear Naren tell you about the estimation tool. And before we move on to Naren, just wanted to say thank you everyone for all of your attention. Feel free to reach out if you have questions you think of later. You know, it's important that you understand it. You can't follow it if you don't understand it. And we want to set you up for success best we can. If you think things are missing or there are enhancements we should make, we do have a GPM forum once a month, and it's on the training calendar that you can join that. Please give us your feedback so we can, we can keep improving. This really was a foundational year, so we know there's stuff missing. We know there's more to do to get the maturity in our process, maturity in our tools. We're working towards that, but we welcome any feedback that can influence that. All right, Naren.
Yeah. Seems Shobha has a question.
Sorry.
Hi.
Where's the question? I don't see it.
Oh, sorry, I was directing it to Naren only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my question was more around the documentation about ServiceNow and project management in ServiceNow. The documentation on Source, if you follow, I mean, it's been, I've done projects and then taken a break, and so sometimes, your memory fades, right? Of course. And I refer to the Source for the documentation, and it's all over the place, right? I follow the step-by-step guide, and it doesn't match some of the things that you were talking about. Even just the status report, or how to manage different things within the project. I did the status report through the project itself, the tab at the bottom, didn't go through the other panel that you went through. So it's conflicting kind of information.
It is, and that's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to a more streamlined tool. So the reason we haven't gone back and tried to change documentation. So first of all, we're not necessarily trying to use source for like that. We're trying to use our playbooks. And a conversation was had this morning, even in the PM GPM forum, about the fact that we need to get one place where the process is located and not multiple. If it's in the SharePoint, it needs to be the SharePoint as our place where you go to get information about the PMO, or source, whatever one it ends up being, but it needs to be one. So we are working on doing that. The other thing we're working on doing is streamlining the tools. So you won't be doing that in ServiceNow soon. And that's why we're trying to not like spend a lot of time redoing documentation, because we're building documentation for the new tool. So you're going to start to see where that new tool really becomes a main place that you're going for all of this stuff, so that it's not as complex. It's much more straightforward. And if you want a demo of that tool, that there is a demo on the training calendar. If you want to look at it, I think it's October 26th. You can join and get a view of that. But we do understand that there's a lot of outdated references on the source. So we've been trying to get folks to come to the IT EPMO SharePoint site instead. It's just, we haven't gotten rid of the stuff on the source yet.
Are you sharing these slides, or are they on the ITPMO?
It's the IT EPMO SharePoint site.
Okay.
Yeah, Shobha, we will share the link with you again so that you can have access to it. But you're absolutely right, Shobha, that things are all over the place because things are moving at a much faster pace, and things are being introduced. The documentation is not up to the speed, and then it is in two places. One is in the EPMO SharePoint site. We hold most of the EPMO related stuff, and then the source is having a lot of the processes that we were following before EPMO, which we continue to follow for some of those steps. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the consolidation and then cleaning up activity is in progress. So shortly you will see that there will be a unified source, or there will be a clear indication of where the documentation is deciding to what extent, etc.
Okay, thanks.
We're hoping that also adding the SGP, we're going to be adding the links to tools and things like that in there. Maybe a good place so that when you're using that SGP reference guide, you're clicking into the right information versus disparate information in different places that some may be legacy and not even followed anymore.
All right, thanks. I had another question in reference to Agile Kanban projects. Are we following that methodology here? And do we just follow the Agile steps that we did previously, what we were taught?
So the overall stages engaged from a high level project management standpoint would follow the flow we have here. But there are still Agile specific, when you get into the low level of executing your sprints, and you'll notice in there that it says like create your backlog of epics, you're creating them in the other tool using those processes. So there is an Agile team that put together things that are specific to Agile, but it's more SDLC, not project management driven. It's more like, here's my list of, how I'm planning my sprint. It's managed in there, that sort of thing. What you're doing here is more project management. Like I still need to kick this project off. I still need to get funding for it. None of that happens in an Agile tool. That happens via this stage gate process. So it's actually both. This is the higher level, and the Agile methodology is the lower level. How do I execute those sprints? Does that make sense?
Yes. I know. I was more specific to the Kanban, Agile Kanban.
And I can't answer, so I'm not part of the Agile team and what they're doing, and that's not under the PMO. There is an Agile team running that. So do you know, Naren, who's the manager of that area?
Kanban is like the David Heimberg, Shobha, right? He was holding the fort for Agile and Kanban. But to answer your question, yes, we will be following the same methodology, the SGP for Kanban projects too. Okay, whether we have everything lined up, I won't say yes to that, but no, conceptually, we are following SGP for waterfall, agile, and agile being Scrum and Kanban. So we are going to follow that.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good.
And if you see there's inconsistencies that we missed in like the SGP for agile that are specific to Kanban, let us know so that we can address those.
Yeah.
Like if you find it, I can't do this deliverable because it doesn't exist here, you know, let us know so that we can add those exceptions in.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, so we are up to the last session, the most difficult session after 3.5 hours or 3 hours of Sharon's SGP process training. So we're going to go into the complex and most difficult part of the project, right? The estimation of the cost, the project. Okay, so we all know as project managers that we are going to go through the phase of cost estimation way ahead of the game. The project is only in the stage of a concept, and we are going to estimate the cost, which is rough order magnitude cost. And a lot of variables, a lot of things are unknown. We don't know the design, we don't know the technical solution. We don't know really how many resources are required, but still we are to come up with a cost estimate. Okay. So this cost estimation is such an important phase where actually we understand that the sponsor will get to know how much it is going to cost for a business cause to be implemented across, right? So what we're going to through in the next 30 minutes or 45 minutes is to understand how the EPMO is now trying to make it a little bit easier for the cost estimation, and also how we are going to propose you the cost estimator tools to help you in estimating the cost. Okay. So that's the training that we are going to go through. This session is going to be in 2 sections. The first section is going to be where I'm going to take you through the overview of that. What is cost estimation and how we're going to merge it into the SGP process. What is the applicability of it? And if it is a formally gated project, what tool we'll use? If it is informal gated project, miscellaneous, blanket, and small projects, what tool we'll use? I'll expose you to that. And then we will take you to the section 2, where we will show you the tool itself that we have on the source. And then Priyanka, my colleague, is going to navigate you through those tabs and explain you how we go from one tab to the other tab, how the data flows, and how it is going to come up to the project cost estimate summary. Okay. So let's get started. So we have this process which you have seen in the morning, right? Let me blow it up. Okay. So you have the process that you have seen, the SGP process with the vertical towers: create concept, develop press release, project initiation, develop design, and then direct and manage and all that. So as you can see, the estimation starts all the way in the beginning, the create concept level, where there are multiple moving or difficult parameters. One, there are not enough resources onboarded yet. Maybe the project manager is onboarded or not onboarded. We don't know the technical design of the solution. We don't know the clear details of the requirements itself. So this is a phase where we are going to estimate things, looking at, okay, this is the concept approximately, this is what could be the solution, these many resources are required, and this is what I'm going to come up as a rough order magnitude estimate, right? So the create concept is the initial stage where we start attempting to develop the cost estimates and then formalize them in the develop press release process. So we will document it finally, we will flow into the press release along with the cost estimated tool, which is nothing but an Excel file, and picking up the data from that, and we create the business case. Now press release is being renamed as business case, which will be presented to the business case challenge team meetings, where it will be reviewed by the senior leadership team. And once it is approved, converts into a project, and then we go through the rest of the towers, right? So the same thing is for the agile methodology. The initial 3 phases will not change. Only the plan, develop, the direct and manage, those are the phases that get into an agile methodology iterative process. Otherwise, our effort of coming up with the rough order magnitude estimates remain the same. right? So moving on, you also saw in the morning that Sharon navigated you to the categorization of projects. What is formally gated project, what's informal gated, and miscellaneous efforts, and then annual and repetitive works, which are routine efforts, and how classically these categorization differs from one to the other, what are the deliverables, etc. So looking at the two major categories is the formally gated and informally gated. So I will draw a line around $1 million mark that if your project is roughly going to be estimated beyond $1 million in the budget, then it becomes a formally gated project. Okay, so we are sticking to only the first tower, that is the create concept level, where we are creating the rough order magnitude cost estimates. If you feel that this is a small project, like, we're just doing a small configurational changes, or it's going to be like $500,000, then you will be automatically falling into the category called informal project. So why I'm bringing this difference is the formally gated project is a lot more strict in terms of the stage gate process, the deliverables, reviews, approvals, and also because of the budget involvement being more than $1 million, we like to have a lot stringent approach to the cost estimation. You follow certain protocols, go deep dive, and try to understand a little bit more in order to come up with the cost estimates. So we will be using a detailed cost estimator tool that KPMG brought to us from the best practices across. And that tool is the one that we are going to navigate in the second section. The informally gated project, basically, if you look at this is the purpose of the cost estimator, which we know, I was talking about this, that the rough order magnitude estimates is what is going to be the output of our effort here. And this is basically to show the decision makers how much would the project cost, very roughly. So what cost estimator tool we will use for what type of project? So here it is. The cost estimator tool, which is a formally gated project, is a lot more detailed. It has a lot more tabs, and it has a lot more information that you need to feed into it in order to come to the final stage, what is a summary of the project cost estimates. Okay. It also comes with the effort estimate and also the cost estimate. And that also gives you by phase of the SGP, each gate, how much is approximately is going to be the cost of the project and how we propagate it. So as you can see, it is a visualization of the project effort and the total project cost. Preloaded rates are given in this. There are all our labor costs that are in SAP. The standard costs have been preloaded. So we will be using costs that are across the board. We're not going to use something which we think should be using. Instead of that, we use the standard SAP load, the cost loaded in SAP. Prorated baseline effort by stage gate, that's what I was telling. Each stage gate, we will be knowing how much would approximately cost once we are done with the cost estimator tool. Then work tabs clearly have instructions and they frequently ask questions to help you to navigate through the tab, and also how to flow from one tab to the other tab. Coming to the informal gated projects, we are giving the same cost estimator that we have been using for the past 5-6 years. You remember that Excel file that we have 3-4 tabs where we put our estimates, IT, labor, material cost, outside services, risk and contingency, which consolidates into the project summary. So that's the cost estimator tool, which is like a vanilla version. We are going to use that tool. We are not disturbing that. So you will use that tool for the informal gated projects. Okay. And all this information is loaded on the source. I'll just show you where the link is. You all know that we generally go to the product model on the source, and you have the cost estimation tab here, and that link takes you to 2 of the pages: cost estimator formally gated, cost estimator informally gated. So you can see the material is there in order to tell you what exactly this does, how the calculation tabs, each tab, what it contains and what it does. And then the reference tabs are provided here. And there is a workflow, which tells you approximately by what tab you go through, what is being done, and how the flow happens from one tab to the other tab.
And this, just to add, this is one where we have in both places. So
Yeah.
if you're on the SharePoint site, the same thing exists in the SharePoint templates. There is a template for this, and in that template, the same information exists.
Exactly. And looking at the cost estimator informal gated, as you know that this is the informal gated, but no, I have not drafted it yet. So this is going to come up, but because we know where to look for it and we know where to get that template, you know that it is in the project templates. So once we go here, so we have the, can you see my screen? I'm on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So you see that there is a cost estimator formal gated. And then when we go down, then you will see a cost estimator informal gated. Okay. So we just renamed it. This was earlier called as cost estimator because we only had one tool for all projects, but now we have two, formal and informal. So this is the same thing, but whereas the other one, the formally gated cost estimator, is the new tool that is being introduced. We had at least 3 sessions earlier in the month of April, May, June, I think. When Alan was here with us from KPMG, we had lunch and learns. Most of you might have attended those sessions to where we gave the overview of this cost estimator tool, but we will run through again so that the new joinees, they can understand how this cost estimator tool works. Okay, so that's the overview, section 1. Any questions before we turn into section 2, the overview of the tool itself? Okay, so now I will stop sharing, and Priyanka, my colleague, is there. She will carry you through the second. I'll be available in terms of answering any questions that you need in order to understand any of the tabs or any of the cells, how the cells flow from one to the other, how the data propagates from one tab to the other tab. Okay. Priyanka, are you there?
Hey, yes, Nareen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll share my screen and I will show you the latest tool, cost estimator tool for the formally gated one for the projects above $1 million. So this is the tool that you can download from the source. The first tab, it gives you a guidelines. One can go through what is the purpose of this document, how it should be used. And it also comes up with an instructions tab where it tells you that you need to go from worksheet 1 to worksheet 8. There are up to 8 worksheets where a user input is required and in sequence. So in a nutshell, in all of the worksheets, there are cells which are colored. The brown one or the beige one is when the user is expected to enter a value in the cell. The blue cells are the calculated fields, and there will be certain formula or macros behind those cells. While the yellow ones, it's again pre-populated, but it also allows the user to adjust any data in those cells. So with that, a user is expected to start with the first tab, key assumptions. This tab is basically for a user to start off documenting all the key points, all the key assumptions of the project, like the risks, the issues, any contingency assumptions, who are the stakeholders for your project, what is the distribution approach. So there are many categories in the first worksheet. So as you can see, all the brown cells is where the user is expected to enter the data. Here, the blue cell, the contingency percentage is pre-calculated. It's set at 50%, but we also give a permission for the user to override this percentage. After you populate this first tab, the next tab is the top-down work items.
Hey, Priyanka, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So in the past, the difficulty of these new project management rollouts is that it's a duplication of information. So when you're displaying to me this, the tabs that you're going through, a lot of the information on these tabs are already expected to be filled out in ServiceNow in the project itself. Now here we're doing risk issues again, and what happens in those cases where there's duplication of information on different places, it gets out of sync, right? You forget to do one place or the other place.
So this
So,
is
Shobha, so
To
the,
be your basis of estimate before you would enter your risk and things into ServiceNow. So this is where you're doing it originally, and then if you get approved, you're entering it into ServiceNow and managing it there. This is to be done prior to your business case approval and prior to your project initiation.
Hold on, a
So,
quick question.
I
A question.
understand
Shobha,
that.
let me just jump in real quick. So we have a tab here that talks about risks and issues and stuff like that, right? When we looked at the stage gate framework, you also had a checklist of stuff, and I think it also included risks or issues. Is the expectation that you have to document those here in addition to other templates that will be provided as part of that?
This is your template. So you're starting here to create a base of estimate. You will, when you're ready to submit your business case, you will grab it from here and put it into your business case. So this is meant for you to think through and create a basis of estimate for your project. And that's that qualitative risk assessment that I showed in your developed business case stage.
So there won't be a need for us to fill out additional templates in this phase for this,
Your
for these
business
items.
business case, and that's for presentation to the business case challenge team. Or URB may have, we don't control the URB's documentation, and they don't use our system. So that's the only other cases. So if there's a concern here, we can definitely take it offline. I don't want to hijack this from Priyanka now, but there you will see duplication of information across. However, for this one, this is where it's initiating thinking through that, right? Like it's not sitting anywhere else right now. When you're doing this, it is not sitting anywhere else. This is where you're thinking through to create a basis of estimate. This is where, now, do we have the potential of integrating this into the tool where then it just consumes those risks into the tool? I think that's a great way to streamline it. Does that technology exist today? I don't think it does. So I don't think you could feed it from here into ServiceNow today. But the goal would be eventually, like the PTS tool, you're entering this there to create that, and then it's just getting fed into your next stages. And that's what we're trying to get.
so a
I mean,
couple of
if the
things that,
project gets approved, if the project gets approved, it goes to ServiceNow. If it doesn't get approved, it will sit there in these Excel
right.
sheets.
So to answer you, Shobha, the question is like, you said if the data is already in ServiceNow, this data, there is no data yet. We are at the create concept level. That means the project is not even created, right? So we are creating the foundation required to get to a project level. So the first step is estimating the cost. Based on the requirements that we understand from the business, we now are coming up with the cost estimates. This data flows into the business challenge document. Then the business challenge document goes to the BCCT review. Once approved, then the project is created. So we are at the first level. We are not even the first step 4. So step 1 is to create this. Now the question of these risks being automatically going into the next phase or next step is not possible because we are at a manual level, right? We don't have a system that is holding right now. There is one that is coming up, the PTS that Sharon was mentioning. It may be able to provide that sort of an automatic flow of data from one step to the other step, but that is in making. As of now, what we have is you create the risk and issues and the management over that, the estimations, assumptions, and all these things in an Excel file. Then the same data would be more or less copied manually and pasted in the BCCT. So what you think here is not going waste. It is forming a basis into the business challenge document. Got it, Shobha?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, Priyanka, go ahead, continue.
All right. So once you input all your key assumptions, you go to the second worksheet, the top-down work items. So this instructions how to use this worksheet is provided here. So basically in this worksheet, you need to define the top-down elements of your expected solution. It's like the major components of what you are planning to deliver. For example, if I take that my project is developing a mobile application, then there are these categories in which this tab is divided, like whether it comes under application, infrastructure, facilities. Say, for example, I'm developing a web application. I will look at the solution attributes. Okay, is it a new application? Yes, mine is a new application. How many screens I'm going to develop for this application? What kind of technology I'm going to use for this application? So based on that, I will add a count. I might be using some complex technology and I'm about to develop 4 to 6 screens, then I will provide a count here. Yes, this is where I feel that the complexity of my application is medium, and I will provide a count. And if I need to provide any further description or I am actually developing, I can give a description. And if there are any special considerations, I will add that to here. So once I input those.
Isn't that kind of a little premature to do this? Because I still haven't gotten a developer. I haven't gotten on board, right? The project, this phase.
Do you mind answering your questions in the chat, and then we can address them at the end? I want to make sure, if we're running out of time, we just want to make sure. I don't mean to be rude. I'm just trying to make sure we cover everything. If you wouldn't mind entering your questions in the chat.
Okay, that's what I asked before, if I could ask the question. Okay, fine, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shobha. So once I enter those input, the next would be, I would be clicking this tab, copy to inventory. This is a macro which will migrate all the information that I input in this tab into all the following tabs going forward. So going forward, all my tabs will have all the data, and I just barely need to review and adjust if there is anything I need to, adjust and make some additional settings. So once I copy to inventory, all that data gets populated to this tab, inventory workforce effort. So this is the tab where you are expected to review and update any assumptions of bottom-up work items. So you might need to adjust, or you see all these blue cells. These are all auto-calculated based on certain data dictionary we already have in this tool. So you just have to take a look, take a review all of your work items and see if any adjustment needs to be done. That's all you need to do on this tab. Similarly, when you go to the 4th tab, that is non-workforce costs, it again brings all that data migrated from sheet number 2, top-down work items. Here also you are expected just to review and update any information if required. When you come here, overall project complexity, the 5th tab. So here you are expected to verify and adjust overall project complexity. So here there are certain project categories like project management and plan, application, technical architecture, change enablement. So whatever seems fit, you can adjust the complexity, right? Simple, medium, or complex. And based on that, all these percentages will get updated. This tab, total project effort summary, again, it brings back all the data from all the previous tabs. You don't have anything to do here. Just take a look, review, and see that all the effort matches with whatever data you have input in before. And if you want, you can override these percentages for every phase. This is the recommended percentage that we have set up, but a user can also has the privilege to override this percentage. This tab, the 7th one, is the total project cost summary tab. So here a user is expected to review the total cost estimates of the project, review the proposed team size, the duration, and correctness of the information. So here is exactly where you would be required that for every stage gate phase, you need to add like who is going to work, who is the resource that is going to work on this project. So if I select a staff engineer, so based on that, all these rates will get auto-populated from our dictionary. And all this information will calculate. And then in this summary table, it will bring up all the total information, cost information. And finally, output summary gives you a nice output layout of all the effort and the cost that you have put, the confidence level of the project, And this is the final output that will be used by the decision makers and the stakeholders to, which will give them an idea, about the project cost estimation. So that's all about this worksheet, how we need to work, sequentially from one tab to another. So if there are any questions, we can take that and address.
Yeah, there are a couple of observations on the chat. As you can see, Shobha, you're absolutely right that it's very, very early in the game that we are not clear on what is the possible solution and how many resources we need, how much time it takes. That's where we are making a lot of assumptions. So the first tab that you saw, the key issues and risks and assumptions, you may have a lot of assumptions and you can input there. That's where we are coming out with this rough order magnitude estimate with 50% confidence. We may not, we are not even talking about 70% or 80% confidence, 50% confidence. But as Wilson also pointed out, that we will be taking help of certain SMEs or certain technical staff that can help us, possibly give us a high profile picture of saying that, okay, this may cost 100 hours with 2 resources with this possible solution. That's all we know at this point. I definitely agree with you that it is a phase that we had to go through. That's why the first word I used before starting the session, the most complex phase of the entire project, other than the direct and manage. This is the phase where we are all subjected to a lot of assumptions, a lot of understanding, bring out our the technology to the front and come up with a solution. Okay.
What for some of these projects you'll find is that when you're ready to submit this to the business case, you should have some technical lead helping you at least to confirm that you're on the right track with these estimates. I don't think we're going blind and just a project manager submitting this. And in most cases, I know the BCCT meetings I've seen, if it has an infrastructure component or a component in any specific technology area that, we have that expertise, they're confirming these estimates. So they're also providing input.
Yeah. A lot of things, you fall back on the experience that we have, all the teams that we have, they can provide us the inputs. This is an exercise that we will be doing as a team, right?
As we get more of these, you also have historical knowledge, hopefully, to start sharing.
Yes, that's right. And the second thing also, you might have observed that there's a pre-populated effort and cost in this worksheet. So based on some industrial best practices and standards, if you select, let us say, a particular configuration item, some of the data that is getting from the back end is being populated right away. So the effort is calculated. Approximately, you require 200 hours to develop complex 4 to 6 web pages. That is already given to you, which you can override. The information is provided to you as a pre-populated data, which you can override. The same way, the cost is calculated based on the standard cost that we are having in SAP. That gets into the effort multiplied by the standard rate per hour, converts into the cost. So both dollar value and effort value are presented to you. And based on the information that you have, you can override it at any time. And also you can bring in the weighted calculations here. That's another feature that has been added to this entire tool, is the weighting of each of those parameters. As you can see, even every tab has got the medium complex and simple type of complex variation. You can also get the risk and contingency type of it, that I expect the probability of is going to be 25% or 50%, or I have a full confidence of 90 to 95%. Such complexities can be brought in, weigh the whole thing, thereby you are becoming more and more realistic in terms of your cost estimates. Whereas this is one feature that we completely lack in the other tool, right? The cost estimator tool that we have been using. It is a flat tool. We just input our hours, we input some vendor cost, it just comes up with a summary. There is no feature for the complexity, weighted averages, or weighted the costing or effort or anything, adjusting the weighting efforts based on some pre-noted effort and cost data. So all these features are missing in the vanilla version for the informal gated cost estimator tool, but they are all built into this formally gated tool. So,
It
all
really
the, yeah,
it creates a basis. It's like you don't
that's
have
right.
a basis of estimate today, you just have an estimate. There's no way to go back and say, oh, well, now I knew so much more about my project. I'm at the plus or minus 10% ready to estimate. And if I look back at this, oh, I could tell you all of these assumptions were wrong. All of these complexities were wrong. And that's why I need, but I will tell you just from an industry perspective. So what you're seeing here, we implemented, and it's at the current CIDO at the last company he worked. And we then measured it back to actuals later to figure out how far off this tool was. So when they originally did their estimate before business case to where they landed at the end of the project, and you would be very surprised at how more accurate the estimates got by forcing you to think through this level of detail early, even if you weren't the keeper of all the knowledge about what will make this up. Even if you just had some broad idea, it really was a significant increase in accuracy in the estimates. So that's kind of why I think he wanted it brought here. And I do agree with you, Wilson. The training definitely needs to be across the board for this one, not just for PMs, because there's the potential other folks are putting this together, not the PMs.
Yeah. In the earlier 3 sessions, Wilson, I think you were also in one of the sessions, but yeah, you're absolutely right. We had to reinforce this exclusively, this cost estimator tool, formally gated one, to the GPMs, because they are the ones that are definitely there. The other team members may or may not be there. You're right.
And Manny, the $1 million question here, it really is order of magnitude, right? At this point, you're just guessing. You're saying, I think it's over $1 million or under. Generally, we kind of know just by nature of the project, hey, we're introducing a new Salesforce system, probably over $1 million. When the only time it's going to be questionable is if it's like internal labor and 6-month project and you're very close, right? And in those cases, I think you have some room for error here. Like it really could be just a conversation with your GPM to say, do we think this is $1 million project? And if so, do we want to do this or not? The goal here is that we catch all the projects that are significantly over or very clear. They're going to be very complex projects.
Yeah. Lawrence, you have an observation that one of the questions that, how does this factor into the financial estimate? At this point, would there be an issue on the project that has not begun? You're absolutely right. What we are having is a first cut of the risk issues, assumptions, whatever we are thinking, the possible solution. Yeah, there are many risks, many issues, which will slowly get refined and modified as they go into the next level. That once we have, maybe we may be having 10 risks identified here, 10 or 15 assumptions. But when we go to the business case challenge stage, maybe we'll have a less number of risks and issues and the assumptions. Once it becomes a project, the risks and issues may take into a different turn altogether. They may not be the ones that are identified in the cost estimator tool. They may be completely different. I agree with you. This is only the first version of what the team is thinking about the risk, issues, assumptions, etc., etc.
So it doesn't look at risks or possible risks and then calculate contingency based on the number that's been documented. That's not worked into the formulas.
No. We are not basing out of, let us say we have 5 risks. There is going to be a percentage of that. No. Still, that sort of automation or inbuilt capability is not there. The tool is giving the facility of, like I said, a couple of things, right? One is based on pre-loaded effort and pre-loaded costs. Number 2, giving the facility to the cost estimator, basically either the GPM or the PM with the technical support from the team, to adjust based on the simple, medium, and complex nature of the effort. And third is to adjust based on the number of phases, like each stage gate now approximately how much is going to be the case. The tool may be showing you 200 hours for the planning phase, but you may come back and say, I don't need that many, or I need more. That much of adjustment you can do it, but not if I have 10 risks, then it will factor into the final estimates. No, that's the inbuilt capabilities are not there.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Okay, then I think right now you're absolutely right, Lawrence, again, on the team that needed to be together to come up with these, they use the tool, absolutely. One head may not be able to input all the details. It's a team effort. I know that that is another big factor, that when create concept level, there is no big team. There is no full support from multiple people, but we as a team, as a GPM or as a project manager, we try to reach out to as many people as possible, take as much as help as possible, try to input as realistic figure as possible, so that our cost estimates are not like, if it is going to cost $500,000, we bump it up to $5 million or $2 million. So we don't go too wary, but we still have to take help of people. I agree with you on that. And there is another team that is coming up. As you know, if your data is being exchanged between systems, like say from SAP, you are moving the data to another system, from another system, you are extracting and loading into your data analytics tool, the integration team is there to help us with the estimates. So the technical teams are standing by, like for example, the integration and architectural team, they are also getting involved at this stage. So we are coming up with that layer of horizontal across these verticals to come up with, take the help of them and say, hey, I have this much data moving from this system to this system, and I'm going to reload it back into SAP. Can you approximately give me what would be the API cost or the development of the data extractors cost, etc. They are ready to come up with estimations on that too. So the help is there, but yeah, I agree with everybody that this is a very preliminary effort of the entire project. So there is no project yet. We're just still trying to estimate ROIM. So yeah,
that there really isn't, like we've seen it on a couple of the major programs as well.
Yeah,
that technical architect isn't an official role. There's no solutions architecture team here necessarily, and I think we're trying to solve that problem as well. But when you say here the technical architect would be more qualified, I agree that they would be more qualified for providing that, what components, that kind of thing. It's more the PM is just bringing all that information together, right? Or GPM or whomever is going to do the business case is kind of just the one bringing it together. Where I've seen it is whoever's doing the business case is orchestrating that estimate, but the information, as Naren said, is coming from multiple places. Maybe historical information on the last time we did this, maybe, a technical person contact that has been given to validate estimate, that kind of thing.
Yeah, with the experience I have in PSEG, right, when we look at 200 projects that we handle in a year, almost 60 to 70% of the projects are some sort of, we have the basis, we have the knowledge, we know how things will flow. But the 30% of the time, maybe there is absolutely a new solution that is being implemented. Yeah, then we are making a lot more assumptions, but almost like 70 to 80% of the time, we know what is approximately is coming from the business, how that will be addressed. We may not be 100% accurate, but most of our experts are there who can guide us to that level, right? So that's the overview of the cost estimator tool, formally gated and informally gated, where it will be used, how it is going to be used. We have these training sessions recorded. Anytime you want to refer to that to get a little bit of help, they're all there on the SharePoint site. We can definitely provide you the links once the training is over. And over and above, in case you want to work with something and you want a hand holding for any of those tabs and how it, just reach out to us. Okay, so we will be happy to provide you and give you the guidance and help as needed. Okay.
In this presentation, are you going to go from the tool start to finish, put in some numbers so we can see what they look like, or is that just not going to be covered in this presentation?
We are going to, actually, we have a couple of cases built onto the SharePoint site. We did work with a couple of projects and we have those examples there. But, I don't think we have time or the duration for doing an exercise now. But that could be, we did it in the previous sessions. One of the good advice was that why don't we create a couple of samples and then put it on the SharePoint. So I think we did that exercise. So you may be able to find that a helpful reference.
Also, we can also add that. So we have this PM and GPM forum once a month, and we're taking suggestions on what additional training to add. If this is one we want to dive into and go through those examples, we'll be doing that with the stage gate process in November. I encourage you to look at that training guide, but also send that training request if you think that'd be valuable. We can do just like a 1-hour session and cover that as a special topic in the training calendar. So
yeah, it might be good to just say, here's a fictitious project, here's how we would do it, and then to see it actually happen.
Absolutely.
we got that same request for the SGP. So we're actually going to bring in a PM who's using it today to kind of walk through how he is using it. I think we will probably do the same with the estimation. We just got to get it calendared. We can take that as an action.
Any other points that you want to know or any other questions that you want answers? Okay. That's good. And I think from EPMO team, we thank you all for participating and giving some of the good points that we have made a note of, and then we'll be working on them. As Sharon was mentioning, there is a PM GPM forum to voice or to give us the feedback how to better the processes or the system as such. So please participate in that. And we had one in the morning here today. There will be one coming up in a couple of weeks. So join us there and give your ideas. We'll start taking a stock of those things and we'll try to implement as much and as many as possible. Okay. So anything else, Sharon, from you or any other EPO team members that you want to communicate here?
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you guys sitting in on this, and reach out if you need any additional help.
Excellent. Thank you all and have a good evening. Yeah. Take care then. Bye-bye.